I think to watch for that I want to kind of discuss here, and if they do end up in Baton Rouge, we'll put that in cement. But one of them that I think makes a ton of sense for LSU is Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson is from Katy, Texas. He was a 4-star recruit. He committed initially to Oregon, ended up signing with Oklahoma, and he is now transferring from Oklahoma. He was out most of the season with an injury, but he fits the mold of a guy that LSU might really, really need. And when I talk about the receiving room that LSU has right now, you're talking about a group that has a lot of guys that are similar in their skill sets. Chris Hilton, Xavier Thomas, and Berrien Brown are all speedsters. They're kick returners. They're fast. Have they been wildly productive in college? I wouldn't suggest that. Brown, the most productive of the three. But they kind of have similar skill sets. You do have Kyle Parker, who's more of a technician. You do have Aaron Anderson, who's a little bit more of a water bug and a little bit more laterally quick than those guys. But I think you need a big physical body that can go up and be a possession-style receiver for you. And that, I think, is what Anderson brings a little bit. He's 6'3.5". He's got a bigger frame, bigger body than those guys. And so that's a guy that I think LSU really would do well to land. I know that A&M is very much in the mix here, and I know that LSU is very much in the mix here. And for me, this is another one of those examples when I know that you're in a war with another team. If you can come out on top, that means LSU really is playing for keeps. And that's the only way we can know, is if the results come. And yeah, I think there are some other schools that were in on Berrien Brown. Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen the list of quote-unquote demands that reportedly Jack Pyburn had for Florida, and I know that he now has committed to LSU. So it stands to reason that LSU is doing a really good job with NIL here. But this is another situation with Nick Anderson where another heavy hitter is very much involved, and we'll see if LSU can get that to the finish line. If they can add Nick Anderson, and I can look at him and Kyle Parker and Chris Hilton and Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson and Berrien Brown, all of a sudden you're good at wide receiver. That was a big concern of mine as of 2 weeks ago. Like, who the heck do they have to catch the football? C.J. Daniels is gone. Shelton Sampson's moved out of there. Like, they just don't have a lot of numbers, and you kind of factor in the fact that Chris Hilton has generally been hurt, and then you look at Kyle Parker, who is hurt. It's like, man, they gotta figure something out. And Nick Anderson, I think, would really make that offense look very talented from a skill position perspective. You tell me that you've got an offense around Garrett Nussmeier that's got Trey Green and Bauer Sharp at tight end. You move back to running back, and you've got what we think is an all-SEC tight back in Caden Durham. Caleb Jackson is still here. You bring in Harlan Berry and JT Lindsey. Then you go to the outside, and you can tell me that you've got Berrien Brown and Nick Anderson to add into the talented guys that you had remaining. Like, that's an offense that I can expect to score some points should they go up front and add one or two offensive linemen and then have this group that Brad Davis has recruited and is developing to grow up a little bit. Like, that looks like a pretty solid offense on paper. So I'm looking at Nick Anderson here over the next 24 hours, and we'll see if LSU can potentially get him in the boat. Safety is another spot that LSU is not finished with. They've got to add in the secondary. The only guy that they've brought in the secondary thus far is Jakeem Jackson. He'll play a corner. They need help in the secondary. Sage Ryan has jumped into the transfer portal. The name that continues to surface on the Twitter streets is Tawfiq Bayard. He is going to visit Baton Rouge this week. That's a guy who is being courted by a number of different universities. Colorado is in the mix here. And LSU has gotten a visit from him. He's a safety. He's 6'1". He's about 200 pounds. Had a really productive first year at South Florida. He was not one of these highly heralded recruits. Like, Berrien Brown and Nick Anderson were high-level 4-star recruits. Jakeem Jackson was a high 4-star recruit. This is kind of the other side of that coin, where Tawfiq Bayard was a 3-star. I mean, I'm looking at his on-3 ranking. He was 1,447th. In the on-3 rankings. He was the number 147 safety, and that's how you end up at South Florida. But he goes in there, he plays, and he was productive. And LSU needs just about any help they can get at safety at this point. You're going to watch some young players play in this bowl game at safety. Deshaun Spears very likely will play a lot of snaps in this bowl game, and I would project him to be in the starting lineup next year, but realistically, you don't have anything set in stone at safety. So I think Tawfiq Bayard would be a quality add there from a size perspective and a productivity perspective. That's a guy that I have my eye on here over the next couple of days as well. Then another one is the name that I mentioned at the top of the show, but I'll bring back in here as we kind of go through this wish list for LSU. And I think that LSU's got to add on the offensive line. I feel like that what they've got currently is not enough in terms of numbers and in terms of talent. You've got to bring in proven guys, and Braylon Moore makes a ton of sense. I know that Shea over on 3, Shea Dixon has put his RPM pick on LSU to land Braylon Moore. Steve Wiltfong has done the same thing. That's usually a pretty good sign for LSU when those two guys put their predictions in. Moore is a 2-year starter at Virginia Tech and would help you in the middle of the offensive line where you could move DJ Chester maybe to his more comfortable position of guard. I think that makes a ton of sense. So these are the guys that you're looking for. I mentioned at the top of the show, like I think LSU is going to add 13, 14 guys from the transfer portal in this class. There has clearly been a philosophical shift in LSU's program with understanding how you can field a championship caliber team. And Brian Kelly said this in his press conference last week, like we can't do this playing 4 freshmen and 3 sophomores at a given time. Like you've got to go get veteran, old players to come in and plug gaps for you. And they've started that process in a very big way. And I think that they'll continue that over the next couple of days. They're continuing to bring guys in on visits, and those have been pretty powerful visits over this point in time. I'm not sure where Braylon Moore is looking at this point, but I know that a lot of folks over at On 3 believe that LSU is the team to beat there, so that would be a very, very big get for the Tigers. So I think for me, the next 3 names that I'm looking for LSU are Nick Anderson, Tawfiq Bayard, and Braylon Moore to jump in this class. And I'm feeling better right now than I did 3 weeks ago about LSU's chances in 2025. I'll be pretty candid with you. When LSU lost that game to Alabama, I looked at the roster, looked at what was going to be walking out the door, and looked at the schedule for next year that includes at Alabama, and at Ole Miss, and at Clemson, and at Oklahoma. And I'm looking at this going, I mean, they're not going to be a contender next year either. So you're talking about going into year 5 without a team that's a playoff team for Brian Kelly. Like that would be a tough pill to swallow. I'm not telling you they're a playoff team right now. I think you're a long way away from that. I'm telling you, you're a lot better than you were 3 days ago. And I went over all the transfers they brought in to this point at the top of the show. You can go back and listen to that on demand wherever you find your sound. And now we're starting to look at some more names that they could add, and they're being really aggressive in getting folks to campus and getting those visits taken care of. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of plugging some holes with some veteran guys. And I think that continues over the next 72 hours or so. So, hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.